Hey, hi again, everyone. It's Chris Thoreau here from Farm Folk City Folk. It's 10:01, and so I'll sort of go off to a slow start here. That way, if we get a few late joiners, they won't miss out on anything. Just before we move on, and I can avoid any technology embarrassments, could somebody please confirm in the chat window that you can hear me? Or am I just some crazy guy talking to his computer in his kitchen? Oh, this is not looking good. This is not looking good at all. Oh, good. Thanks, Michelle. Okay. We do have enough webinar experience to know that this stuff usually works. And thank you all for joining. As you know, the topic today is seed economics. And we're going to look at two aspects of seed economics today. One is growing seed on contract, and the other one is looking at enterprise budgets, which is a spreadsheet tool we have developed to help you better understand the economics of seed production. So I see everybody is muted and has their video off. That's great. It just makes things a little easier during the actual presentation part. But when we get into the question and answer period, we can definitely turn on our videos because it's really nice to be able to see each other as we ask questions. If you haven't found the chat box, it's at the bottom of the screen, or you can hit Control H to get it to pop up, or Alt H, sorry, to get it to pop up or disappear, depending whether you want that to show up. We are recording the webinar today, so there will be a chance to view this again later. And we'll have a quick survey at the end as well to get your feedback on things. So let's move along here. Actually, I'm noticing, we've only got 10 people here, which I think is a good number. And I think we have time, judging from our last webinar, that we could actually do a quick round of introductions. So what I'll do is I'll just prompt each of you based on how you're listed here. And if you just wanted to say a quick hello, let us know where you're calling in from and what your interest in the seed contract and enterprise budgets is. Try to keep it to about 30 or 40 seconds so we can move along and keep things going. But yeah, it'd be good to know what people are here for and what you'd really most like to learn. So Ali, do you want to start? You can unmute yourself and just do a quick introduction. I could also unmute you if that helps. So Ali, are you there to do an introduction? Okay, so I don't see Ali. How about you, Isaac? Are you available to do an introduction there? Oh, try that. Isaac, are you there for an introduction?
No, I'm not available.
Oh, I can hear you now.
Yeah, at least.
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
But I'm at work. I can't introduce.
Sorry. Okay. All right. How about Jolene? Do you want to do an introduction?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Okay, great. Hi, I'm Jolene. I'm at Woodgrain Farm, which is up in the north of BC, north of Smithers by about an hour. And we do market gardening, and I grow a little bit of seed crop for the Bcc Ecoseed Co-Op. I'm a pretty new member there. Yeah, anything else?
That sounds good. Yeah, thanks for that. That's great to hear you're here. Thanks, Jolene.
Yeah, thank you.
How about Jay Bishop? Do you want to go next? And you can unmute yourself there. And if you're also at work and can't do an introduction, that's okay. Michelle Tsutsumi, do you want to go?
Hi everyone, I'm Michelle. I farm at Golden Years Farm in Chase, and currently we just save seed for our own use, but it's something I've wanted to evolve into for a while. So I'm looking forward to this.
Great, thanks, Michelle. Sarah, are you there? Sarah Clemens?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Sarah from Tsawwassen Farm School. We're a farm school that trains the next generation of organic, small-scale, direct marketing veggie farmers. We grow vegetables and pigs for pork, as well as eggs. Interested in potentially growing seed to show students about seed production and potentially selling to BC Ecoseed Co-Op in the future. Yeah, so interested in learning more through this webinar.
Great, thanks, Sarah. How about Silver Pearl?
Hi, it's Michael Silver. My farm is up in Argenta, north end of the Kootenay Lake in British Columbia. I have a market garden, and I'm interested in sort of the back end sort of business aspect of the seed production for sale. I've grown a bit of seed on my own, and just looking to sort of as a possible new avenue to take the farm.
Great, thanks, Michael. Yeah, good to see you here. We haven't seen you around in a while, so it's great that you're still interested in seed and still producing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Tiffany, do you want to go next?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hi, yeah, this is Tiffany Traverse. I run Four Sister Farm up in northeastern BC, a little town called Progress, just outside of Dawson Creek. And we do sort of a little bit of experimental plant breeding, mostly just our own kind of stuff that we play around with on the farm. But yeah, looking to possibly start selling and marketing our regionally adapted seed, because we're northern, so we're like zone 2, 3. We're kind of on the cusp in Dawson Creek there. So yeah, just looking to see what's out there for us.
Great, thanks, Tiffany. And Yoshi, are you there to do an intro as well?
Oh, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hi, Yoshi.
Great. Hi, Chris. Hi, everyone. My name is Yoshi, and I work with Cedar Isle Farm in the Ecoseed, and that's where we grow organic grains. And I also work at the Yarrow Eco Village Community Farm. That's where I have a market garden and also save seeds for myself. And yes, I'm interested in seed economics, so how I can incorporate it into part of my livelihood in the midterm or long term. Not there yet to start the seed business, but I'll be glad to learn anything that's it's available to be offered. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Yoshi. Did we get everybody there? Is there anyone else who wants to do a quick intro or is able to do a quick intro? And if not, that's definitely okay. And I'll say so far you are all great webinar participants, so I think things will go very smooth today. So I'll proceed with the webinar here. What we'll do is we'll do the seed contract first. Then we'll stop and do a round of questions there specific to that, and then we'll move on to the enterprise budgets portion, look at that, and then we can do another round of questions and any discussion that comes up after that. I'll post a link after that to a sort of a post-webinar survey to get your feedback, and then hopefully we'll have some follow-up with some of you for future seed work. So this work with the with contracts and enterprise budgets is one of the many things that has grown out of the Bcc Trials. And the Bcc Trials is a collaboration with Farm Folk, City Folk, UBC Farm, and farmers throughout BC and actually now throughout Canada. And one of the main goals of the Bcc Trials is to identify vegetable crops and varieties that are doing the best in different locations, not only to help farmers choose what's going to be good for market gardening, but also to give people a sense of what's going to be a good variety to grow for seed. So we want to get as much feedback as we can. And it actually really helps to have feedback from farmers in all their in the different regions to give us a sense of what's working in some regions but maybe isn't working in others. So the focus of a lot of our programming is around training. We do a lot of field days and workshops, and we've got some economic tools which we'll introduce to you here today. And the overall goal of the Bcc Trials, in collaboration with other projects we're doing and the Bauta Family Initiative on Canadian Seed Security, is really helping increase the production and the quantity, quality, and diversity of local organic seed. So we're really, really focused on the organic seed sector, and we'll talk about that as we get moving along with things here. So there is a fairly robust seed market in BC. So according to a 2014 study from the Canada Organic Trade Association, the vegetable seed market for organic seed in Canada is about $28 million annually. And it really does appear to be a growing market. From BC's perspective, about a quarter, actually more than a quarter of that market actually is here in BC. And so we know that BC is a real hotbed for organic vegetable production and for seed production, as we do have a good concentration of small-scale vegetable seed companies here in BC. So the challenge we see and the opportunity we see is that a lot of the spending on seed is going to US companies, and the seed is being purchased and imported into Canada. So we see not only an opportunity to develop the market to create more economic opportunities for farms, but also there's a chance for us to be exporting some of that seed. We can produce for seed within BC, we can export to the rest of Canada, and we could export to other places in North America and around the world as the sector grows. Although our focus is on local seed production, we do see opportunities at supporting a real global movement towards more organic production, and specifically in organic seed. So part of the increasing the amount of seed that is sold to Canadian gardeners and farmers is really increasing the amount of seed that's available for sale. And right now, a lot of seed comes through a lot of the small-scale seed companies here in BC. And right now, there's about 15 small-scale vegetable seed companies who do a lot of their sales through websites, retail stores, and Seedy Saturdays, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. If you're not, they're basically these one-day seed fairs that happen across BC and across the country, where gardeners and farmers can go to buy local seed, engage with the seed growing community, and just stay connected to more of what's going on in the seed world here in BC. So one of the challenges is that a lot of the scale at which the seed companies operate is really focused on providing packet sales to the gardener scale grower. And one of the goals of looking at seed contracts is to encourage growers to scale up their production and start growing more bulk seed, which can be marketed to farmers. So what this looks at is sort of a contract growing model, where you're not growing the seed and packing it up yourself in a seed company. You're actually growing the seed and selling it to another company. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the options there. And Jolene, in her introduction, talked about her membership with the BC Ecoseed Co-Op. So there's some advantages and disadvantages to contract growing. For a lot of growers, it's a chance to sell more volume of seed with less marketing time. A lot of time can go into the marketing and packaging a seed, and that has a cost to it. So that takes that away from the grower. It also allows the grower to focus on a smaller number of seed crops. Many seed companies are carrying 50, 100, 200 varieties of seed, and by focusing on larger crops but a smaller number of crops, it allows the seed grower to focus a little more on quality and just giving those crops a lot of attention. Because so many people are already producing vegetables, seed production is a really great add-on, and when we get into our case studies, we can see how Dan Briesbot, Ferme Tournesol, has done that over years there in Quebec. I think a big motivating factor for people is just getting more locally grown seed available for farmers. As I mentioned, there's an economic piece to that, where we can keep some of those agricultural dollars in BC. And as Tiffany alluded to, the more we grow seed within a particular environment and do good selection on that seed, the more adapted that seed is going to be to different environments. And that's really going to give us more stability in our agricultural system over time, especially in the context of climate change, which is a concern for a lot of growers. And of course, certified organic farmers really want certified organic seed. There isn't enough certified organic seed on the market to meet all those demands. And as an aside, there's not a lot of breeding happening for organic conditions. So doing this work here really gives an opportunity to build that market locally, get more locally adapted seed, and get more seed developed through organic systems. What happens now is a lot of seed is grown and bred in conventional systems, then spends a year on an organic farm in order to get that status. But we know that breeding doesn't adapt that seed to organic conditions, and so we are missing some opportunities there. So to get a better understanding of the opportunities for growing seed on contract, my former colleague, Shauna McKinnon, who's now working with the Climate Action Initiative in BC, interviewed seed companies, including BC seed companies, regional seed companies in other parts of Canada, and US seed companies that specialize in organic and ecologically grown seed. And here we're looking at what are the different ways that these companies engage with growers to develop contracts, what are the growing conditions and the requirements look like, and how does that differ between companies. So the interview really focused on what the potential opportunities are for new contract growers, getting a sense of what seed crops are in demand, and how to start new contract relationships with these seed companies. It can take time to build that relationship, and so getting an early start really makes a difference. And a lot of this information isn't just relevant to BC growers, it really is relevant to growers across the country. I guess a quick summary before we launch into it is these seed companies are interested in new and more contract growers, and they know that BC has a tradition of growing good quality seed and a lot of seed production. So there's a lot of opportunities to build these relationships and start growing more seed on contract. So, as I mentioned, these growers are excited about the growing market for vegetable seed, especially in organics. More and more people are becoming interested in seed, and seed sales are increasing. Small-scale seed companies in BC tend to do well and continue to do well through online sales, retail sales, as well as at Seedy Saturdays. And I think the development and the growing market of the BC Ecoseed Co-op is speaking to the ongoing support for local seed. So there really is room for growers to come in as contract growers, and some people actually feel there's still room for more seed companies to come in and join the cohort that exists already. So there's a growing demand from all seed companies, and you get companies like Salt Spring Seeds, who's been in business for 30 years, still seeing a growth and interest in local ecological seed, and actually far beyond anything they had anticipated or experienced previously. So the market is clearly growing. Dan Brisebois is part of a cooperative farm in Quebec called Ferme Tournesol, and they have built seed production into their farming business, which started off as vegetable production, then did a bit of mixed production, and now has actually separated those two enterprises. And for Dan, as a person running a regional seed company who also grows seed on contract for larger seed companies, is he feels growing seed on contract can offer returns to the farmer that are similar to market vegetable production or those running their own seed companies. So as you're growing larger scale and selling your seed in bulk, you may be getting a lower price per unit weight, but you're also putting a lot less time, effort, and cost into that. And so the returns can end up being very close to the same. So when we look at seed production, we're thinking about it in terms of getting beginners and advanced growers engaged. And so for beginners, it can be a little intimidating to get into the market, but what seed companies can do is work with you on crops that are not necessarily the highest value and can really give you a chance to learn the ropes of seed production and develop relationships with seed companies. So what growers, seed companies will often do is start new contractors off with easier, lower value crops. And once they've proven themselves, can give them a chance to move on to more challenging and profitable crops. And the best market for beginners are really sort of the small and regionally focused seed companies like Salt Spring Seeds that can really help get that seed out to the market really easily. So crops like peas and beans that can take a lot of space compared to yields, and squashes with large isolation distances are relatively easy to grow seed crops. And small and local seed companies can't grow all their own supply. So having other growers grow for them really helps them increase their volume and increase their diversity so they can offer multiple varieties at a time. A lot of people also have a lot of luck with the self-pollinating crops because there's much less risk of getting pollination from another variety or potentially from a weedy relative, which could really affect the economic value of the seed. So if you're an advanced grower, you're skilled and experienced and have a good sense of the process, there is a big gap in the market for certified organic biennials. And we really like to focus on biennials because the BC climate here, especially the coastal climate, is very well suited. So beets, carrots, brassicas, they all do very well in this climate, and there's a good market for that in seed. And we also see, just from our experience at farmers markets, that these are the things that farmers are growing. So it is a crop with they are crops with a lot of potential. Yeah, and I think you can kind of look at things from a regional and a national perspective. Selling locally here in BC is great, but farms like Ferrum Turnasol are looking for opportunities to be buying seed from throughout Canada. It's hard to grow a lot of biennial seed crops in Quebec, so the opportunity to have some of that seed contracted out here in BC really would help Ferrum Turnasol and companies like that expand what they can offer and increase the quality of the seed they're offering. There's also the potential for some American companies such as Johnny's and High Mowing that are always looking for new contract opportunities with skilled growers. So we're going to spend a little more time here on organic seed, and I do know many of you on this webinar already, so know that you know the organic world very well and sort of don't need any background on that. We know that the market for certified organic seed is growing, and we are finding that certifiers globally are becoming more strict about the use of organic seed as that seed becomes more and more available. So as more supply becomes available with more crops and varieties offered in organic, the more the market grows, because certified organic growers are going to have to use that seed. Of course, we still want that seed to be of very good quality, so quality assurance, which we'll get into, is a big part of that. So we really see an opportunity for the organic seed market to continue to grow. And we might look at that relative to the conventional seed market, which is also robust and growing, but the returns on conventional seed aren't as good as with organic seed. So just like organic produce, we are getting premiums organic seed that is really valuable. With certified organic seeds, there's a couple things to keep in mind, is whether you have just a regional certification or if your certification is national. So if you just have regional certification, then the seed you grow can only be sold as certified organic in British Columbia. So if you do want to sell to a company like Ferrum Turnasol or High Mowing, which is a cross-border sale, it is important that you have national certification through the Canada Organic regime. So for some growers, that might not be something they need in the beginning if they're doing small local contracts. But if you do see the opportunity to do more national contracts, that might be an upgrade in your certification you might want to consider. And talking to some growers, they don't feel it's that much of a greater expense or that much more paperwork to be doing the national certification. Many produce growers just don't need that certification because they're selling all their produce very locally. With seed, it's a little easier to export and ship, so there is more opportunity for a bit of a national market. So I really can't stress enough the importance of quality when we get into larger scale production. Quality, I think, is important at all levels of production. But as a gardener, if you're getting seed that's maybe got a few off types or doesn't germinate as well, there's the consequences is a little bit inconvenient. But when we start getting into much bigger volumes of seed and much bigger crops, it's really important for farmers to know that they're getting good quality seed. So this can be trueness to type, germination rates, vigor, lack of disease, uniformity in growing. All these things, which there's different ways to look at quality, but what's really important is your end user in many cases is going to be a farmer that has some economic dependence on the quality of that seed. So some of the work we've done, and the information is available on the BC Seeds website. You can see the link there on your screen, is to give you a sense of what some of those quality assurance parameters are. And over time, we want to see growers continually increase the quality of their seed. And a lot of seed companies like to work really closely with their contract growers throughout the season to help ensure that quality is there. So it's certainly not a case of, grow this seed and we'll see you at the end of the season. Seed companies do like to work with the grower to keep that seed quality high. So besides looking at quality assurance and some of the certified organic regulations as they relate to seed, we've got a number of case studies on our website that take a look in a bit more detail of what the experience are of some of the seed companies. So two that we focused on are Salt Spring Seeds based here in BC and Ferme Tournesol in Quebec. Another one we've added is also West Coast Seeds, which is a brokerage company based here in BC as well. So the case studies are on the website and go into a bit more detail, but we really like this mix of companies because they're slightly different scales and slightly different approaches. So Dan Jason at Salt Spring Seed is doing a lot of local sales, a lot of online sales, and has a very strong presence at CD Saturdays, and is doing a lot of contracting. There's growers all around BC that are growing multiple crops for Dan to help him widen the varieties that he has available through the seed company. And that's really helped him keep his crop diversity really high. The agreements Dan has with his growers are often a little less formal than you might have with the bigger seed company, like West Coast Seeds, that is looking at opportunities to do some contracts with local growers, but will have much more formal requirements and sort of scale requirements. Ferme Tournesol is an interesting case because they're really a growing seed company and are almost a balance in between the two, where as they grow, they do want to constantly increase their seed quality, but as a company that's selling nationally and potentially doing national contracts, that national certification is going to be an important piece to them as well. So you can see there's a sort of way to work your way up with different types of seed companies to increase the sort of level of responsibility you have as a seed grower while you're increasing your skills. So here's just a little example of some of the things when you're discussing with a seed company, what the expectations would be of what you might expect. And some seed companies will have this very, very formal, and you'll go through this step by step, and other seed companies will be a little less formal. So no matter how formal it is, it's really good to know these things because these are all aspects of seed production that are indicators of quality. And even if you don't need to meet all these assurances in each contract, knowing about them is really, really important. So this also helps the seed company know that the seed they're getting has been grown to a certain standard, and really gives them some assurance that they can pass on that seed to the public as well. So with some companies, you may have a handshake contract, or in these day and age, you might do an agreement over emails. And for bigger companies and bigger contracts, you would be looking at something that is a little more formal. So we have a few sample contracts on the website that you can take a look at from Fedco and High Mowing Seeds. And they take a look at all sorts of things about your expected planting dates, what your check-in dates are going to be like, what kind of roguing and isolation distances are going to be required. And these companies do a fairly good job of keeping in contact with you throughout the season. So communication for these companies is a really, really important aspect of making sure that the seed that they're buying and contracting is of high quality. So so seed companies are offering a wide range of seed nowadays. A lot of the smaller scale companies are focused on open pollinated varieties, while the bigger companies like Johnny's and High Mowing also offer hybrids. All the production that we're looking at supporting and is reasonable for growers is actually in the open pollinated market. And even though we are seeing an increase in hybrids on the market, and there are some concerns about the takeover of hybrids, most of these companies still feel there's a really good case for maintaining the quality of open pollinated crops. We know from our work in BC here the importance of maintaining that diversity. And so we really see there is support from the seed companies in continuing to grow those open pollinated varieties. Most of the hybrid varieties are grown by specific companies under very specific conditions. And we are looking at doing some research on that ourselves to see what the opportunity is there. But one of the really driving factors around seed in BC is really having that seed available for people to save and propagate themselves. And so it's really, it's been really important and really stated by growers that that open pollinated seed is really important to them. At the same time, growers have said, you know, there's an interest in growing hybrid seed because it's a skill that they would like to learn. And the reality is a lot of small scale growers are buying hybrid seed for their operations because they do see productivity differences there. So it's a very difficult line to walk at times, but it is something to look at. But right now, the focus really is on open pollinated seed, and there are still lots and lots of great varieties for people to work with. So coming to the end of the section here, a lot of these things we've discussed are a lot of great resources on our website at bcseeds.org. We've got a whole section on business resources, and we're actually doing a bunch of additions and updates these days. So quality assurance and regulation stuff is there. A lot of this is drawn from CFIA documents where seed production, importing, and sales in Canada is regulated. We take a look at organic certification like we discussed, so you understand where you cannot sell your seeds as organic growers. And then we have our case studies there for Ferrum Tournesol, Salt Spring Seeds, and West Coast Seeds. The sample contracts I referred to are also there. And there's just a good section on advice to get started as well. So it should give you some more insights into what you can expect, what resources are there, and how that's going to look when you start looking for a contract and get into that. We also have a link within the website to the BC Ecoseed Co-op, which I'm a big advocate of. Maybe at the end, Jolene could talk a bit about her experience with the co-op. No pressure. What the co-op is actually doing for a lot of people is answering the question of where and how do I market my seed? While the idea of running a small-scale seed company is appealing to some people, to other people, it's a little too much to add on to the production they're doing already. And so knowing that they can grow seed and sell that seed as part of the co-op, take some of that marketing and packaging and all that pressure off, it still allows them to be contributing into the local seed system. So yeah, I do hope you get a chance to check out some of those resources, and we do hope to be adding more over time. And we do hope this website is a really good go-to place for you to get more resources in the future. So this is the end of the first section here of seed contracts. And I'd like to open things up to questions here. And we can do this through both the chat, if that's easier for you, and through our and through video, so we can actually kind of take a look at each other if you guys want to do that. So if you do have some questions, maybe just let me know in the chat window there, and we can look at going through some of those questions now. And then what we'll do is we'll move on to the seed enterprise budget portion. I'm going to stop and take a drink of water while you contemplate your questions. All right, so apparently I described things really well, or everybody has dozed off and lost interest in seed completely. I somehow don't think that's the case. And Sarah, it looks like you have a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering what's involved in becoming a producer for BC Ecoseed Co-op and what they require of their producers, how to get started.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Sarah. I don't have the full details of that here, but the process is, it is an application process. So you would submit your application to the co-op, give them a sense of what your seed growing experience is and what you're hoping to contribute to the co-op. The co-op will review your application and actually invite you to a meeting of the co-op members so they can ask any additional questions. In some cases with people, if you have more limited experience, they might pair you up with a mentor. And so there's somebody that you can work with within the co-op that can help guide you along. And, you know, one of the goals of the co-op isn't to just be, you know, growing and marketing seed. There's a big educational and participation component. So the co-op is going to be is in touch with growers all the time to sort of work with them through that process. So yeah, it really just starts out as an application. A review by the existing members, any additional questions there, and then, you know, a chance to join the co-op. Do you, Jolene, maybe want to add anything else to that?
Yeah, I guess the one thing I just point out, as we've talked about organic a lot, is that the co-op is a mix of members that are either certified organic or ecologically grown. So you have to kind of agree to follow the organic standards, whether you're certified or not. But we do have, like, yeah, the co-op consists of both types of farming.
Yeah, that's a great point there. So, so does that answer your question, Sarah, or could you use a bit more information?
Another part of the question that has come up just now for me is, are they looking for growers to grow specific seeds for them, specific vegetable crops or varieties? Do they direct you in what they'd like to see grown and sold through the co-op?
So my impression is that's the direction things are moving. Ideally, you want to be growing your crops through the co-op collectively. If everybody is growing early girl tomato or something, obviously that doesn't make sense. So there is ongoing conversation about, what crops people can offer and what crops are needed by the co-op. There are some cases where growers are growing similar crops for different reasons, and it might be that there is a demand for that, and the grower can't grow as much seed as needed. So having multiple growers do that is helpful. And in other cases, it's growers growing the crops that they know well. Keeping in mind, some of your crops can be sold through the co-op over multiple seasons. So there is a chance if your seed isn't available through the co-op in 1 year, it could be available the next year. Did you want to add anything to that, Jolene?
Yeah, I would just add that that's a very evolving piece of the co-op. So that's something that we kind of work on every year to pre-plan what crops will be grown. And there's kind of if someone's been growing a certain crop for a while, they might get priority over that crop. But we're still at the point where we're growing, so the more seed, the better. And we're just trying to plan ahead to let everyone know what you're growing so that there's not too much redundancy, but not that redundancy is always a bad thing.
Okay.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Jolene. Sorry to put you on the spot, but I might do that again.
Yeah, that's great.
It looked like, Michael, did you have a question as well?
It was sort of, the question was sort of kind of answered. I'm just wondering, so, I could be growing a certain kind of varieties of different crops from seeds that I've collected, but then I was sort of intrigued about, is there like a seed pool that we can tap into based on different contracts and different companies are, wanting you to grow out specific seeds for each contract? So would they supply you with the seeds or you, so it sounds like it can work either way. You can say, hey, I have this kind of seed, it's this variety, or they are like, hey, try this out. But it seems like if they're sending you seeds, you have to work with that almost like a season before you go out and try to sell it back to them, if that's correct.
Yeah, that's a really good point there, Michael. I think one thing to consider with seed production on a contract level is seed production starts before you even plant the seed. And the question is, what seed do you plant? So in some cases, the company might send you seed, which would be their stock seed, and say, this is our best seed. We're contracting you to grow it out for us on contract and then sell that seed back to us. And those are often very strict contracts where we know the seed, we know that the yield should be around this. You are not allowed to sell the seed to anybody else. You're not allowed to save the seed unless we're going to keep a bit for future stock seed. So once again, those are conversations that would be on a contract basis. So most of the time, you are not going to grow a seed. You're not going to grow a seed crop until you know what's going to be bought from you, essentially. There are some cases, and I've had an example where I've approached a seed company and said, "Hey, we actually have this seed available. Are you interested in buying it?" And they've said, "Yeah, actually, we'll take 5 pounds of that." So there are cases where you might have seed, and you can sell it to a company. But as a general rule, you want to try to establish your contract and then grow the seed out based on that contract, which may involve using stock seed from the company or using your own seed that you're providing.
Okay, so in a way that could happen, let's say if I was growing seed for 2000, or I create a contract, sometimes you can go 2 years back. So if I wanted to really set up for something for 2020, they're going to send me seeds for 2019, and I would be sending them samples based on, and then hopefully meeting their criteria with regards to quality and production. So it's almost like you're definitely a lot of back end and a lot of pre-planning in different formats based on.
Yeah, most definitely. And another thing to consider is, let's just look into next season. Let's say, so if you're growing a biennial, you would grow your specklings in 2019. You would overwinter that crop or put it into storage. You would grow the seed crop in 2020. Even though technically that could be available in 2021 for sale, what the seed company might do is say, actually, as a new grower, we're gonna grow out your seed one season just to get a look at it in a trial, and then we're gonna sell it in 2022. So if you think about sowing something in 2019, you may not get a return on that until 2022. So that's a case where I think a lot of people get a little hesitant about seed production, because the nice thing about growing produce is you grow it, you sell it, you get the money right away, and it's a very quick cycle. Seed can definitely be a longer cycle because of the sort of nature of how it's sold. One advantage, though, is you may grow enough seed to sell to a company over multiple years. And so in the beginning, you may have a lag of a couple of years before you're paid. But if you're constantly growing seed, you may find after a while, you do have this steady income coming in. It's just not as immediate as it is with your produce.
Okay. What about when you're working with contracts or any of within the BCC Ecoseed Society? There must be, I guess, varieties of a higher demand, like they're looking for specific, different specific varieties, whether it's spinach, or beans or something like that, or perennials like carrots.
Yeah, do you want to comment on that, Jolene? I know from my conversations with the co-op, coming in with a random variety that isn't selling well probably won't be that appealing to the co-op. I think it's a matter of finding stuff that grows well, that sells well, and that there's some demand for, and that's going to change over time. Do you have any thoughts on your conversations with the co-op, Jolene?
Yeah, right now, it's kind of still very much like, if you're interested in growing a seed crop, then you can go for it. So, you have to kind of know yourself what the demand might be for a certain type of seed. For instance, I'm growing a type of mustard this year, which is really nice, but I know there's not going to be a huge market for it, but we're still working on expanding the diversity of seeds that we carry. And then there's definitely crops that are in high demand, like radish and carrots and things like that. So we have some of the bigger growers some of the growers are already growing pretty good volumes, but there's definitely a lot of room for expansion there. So we're definitely into diversity and also into breeding. So there's still in a really big expansion phase. If I'd be my main comment there. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
No, that's good. It gives me a sort of a perspective on the approach.
I have a question also about BC Ecoseed Co-op. Do they have collective tools for cleaning and processing and packaging seed? Did that come through?
You want to comment on that, Jolene, or?
Oh, well, Chris, do you have any comments on that? Because you're actually down. See, the challenge I have being up in the north is that there are resources available, but I don't get to take advantage of them as much because I'm so far away. So that's kind of one of my challenges still. We have built, I know collectively, that we've put some funding towards building an air separator. So I think currently we try to clean all our own seed to a fairly complete clean, but we're hopefully trying to kind of move towards having maybe some of the final and fine cleaning done at the central location, which right now is at Glorious Organics in Langley.
Yeah, so as a quick follow-up on that, Farm Folk City Folk in the summer received a grant from Van City to build a mobile seed cleaning trailer. And so this allows us to take that trailer to different locations so farmers can use it to clean their seed. Now, one of the challenges with getting growers to scale up is where when you're small scale, while a couple of hand screens might have been sufficient, even when you move from sort of like 2 to 10 pounds of seed in certain varieties, you really need the tools to clean that seed efficiently. So we're in the process of putting that together now, and that will be made available to everybody, including the co-op. And we actually really do hope the co-op really does use it a lot, because it's the co-op represents a lot of growers, and our goal is to get as much reach as possible. The challenge with a unit like that is, I can't drive it up to Jolene in the north. It's a little too far. So a lot of our focus for now is going to be on the lower mainland, getting into the Okanagan and onto Vancouver Island. And if we see there's a lot of demand and a lot of popularity, we would look at helping other local organizations fundraise to do their own processing, build their own processing facilities elsewhere, or look at receiving seed ourselves and cleaning it on behalf of growers or the co-op or something like that. So there's a lot of models that can come out of that. But we are looking at sort of bringing in some of that bigger scale equipment to help growers scale up.
Awesome, that answers my question.
All right, so any other questions in there from folks before we move on to the very fun task of looking at spreadsheets? So yeah, so if there's no questions, if you think of something, you can definitely ask a question at the end. What I'd like to do now is just move on to the next section and start looking at our seed enterprise budgets. I'm going to go over this a little more briefly than I did in our original webinar, because one of the things we got funding for the winter and over the next couple seasons is to go through the seed enterprise budget with growers one-on-one. So I've actually talked to some of you already about sitting down, and we do about an hour and a half or a 2-hour consult, which is going through the enterprise budget with you individually, helping you input your information and understand how it's used, and then helping you along as you put more information in there. So I'm not going to go into great detail here, just want to give you a sense of the tool, how it arose, and what it would look like to use that as a tool moving forward. All right. So a seed enterprise budget really is a spreadsheet that helps you determine what your sort of potential revenue and your input costs are for producing a seed crop. And many of you are probably already familiar with similar tools for producing your crops. If I grow 100 or 1,000 row feet of a crop, how much planting and weeding and harvest time is that going to take, and what is the value of that crop? So we developed this model based on the work of Dan Brisebois and Richard Wiswall on their crop enterprise budgets, and we've just made it a little more specific to seed. So we're going to just take a look at that, talk a little bit about the different components of it and what that looks like. I'll review the key points in that, and then we can do another round of questions after that. So a seed enterprise budget, and there's a quick look at the intimidating spreadsheet there. And I know there's a spectrum of spreadsheet opinions in the farming world. Some of you love them, and some of you get nauseous thinking about them. So it's one of the reasons we wanted to develop a consult, and so we can help walk people through it to not be so intimidating. So really an enterprise budget kind of looks at 3 components of your crop to determine the value of that crop. So we're looking at the input costs, the potential yield, and the potential revenue. And we say potential there because you may have an off season and get a lower yield, or you may have a great season and get a higher yield. And potential revenue because really you only get revenue from a crop if you're able to sell it. So growing it is one thing, getting it to market is another. So in terms of inputs, there's a couple things to consider with inputs. And one is sort of the obvious inputs, that you're seeing on a day-to-day basis. The composts, the seeds, the labor that goes into production. And these are significant costs. But another thing that's really important to there is to look at your overhead costs. And what the spreadsheet does is take things like your rent, your electricity bill, your water bill, your website costs, things like that, like all these other things that are costs of running your farm, and they build that into the price of a crop. And what the spreadsheet basically does is spreads that overhead cost evenly amongst all the theoretical growing beds on your farm. And hopefully that'll make a bit more sense once we get into looking at the spreadsheet there. It would also cover any structures you have if you're growing anything in a greenhouse or an isolation tent. Yield, of course, is a big component of determining what your revenue is going to be. Within the enterprise budget, we do have some yield estimates based on some existing resources, though over time, as you grow a seed crop more and more, your estimates should get more and more accurate by basing it on your own experience for your region. It's really, really hard to find data that's applicable across all the regions for yields. And then the other thing is looking at your potential markets. Even though we've talked about contract growing or selling seed packets at CD Saturdays, really one of the approaches that we're finding is really important to growers is selling to a whole bunch of different markets. So you might sell a portion of your seed on contract, a portion of it goes to the BC Ecoseed Co-op, maybe you sell a little bit to Salt Spring Seeds, and you have your own website, or you sell a little bit at the farmer's market. And so the spreadsheet breaks those things down and gives you a sense of what my likely sales are going to be. The trick there is just so you don't put down, okay, I have enough seed to sell 2,000 packets at $3 each, and so that's $3,000 worth of crop. The reality is that, there's a lot of costs that would come with that, and selling 3,000 packets of seed is actually very difficult. So it gives you a more reasonable estimate of what your sales would be based on a bunch of different markets. And just to answer a quick question that's popped up here, the Seed Enterprise Budget template is available on our website. And so you can take a look at that and get started with it on your own. Or as I mentioned, we can do these consults, which we'll talk a bit more about as we move along here. So there is a tutorial. So one of the things I have done, so you can, some people don't have the time for a consult or really only have time in the middle of the night to do these things. So we do have a tutorial that goes over the enterprise budget in quite good detail. So you can take a look at it on the link there. And within the website, there's a link to the spreadsheet and a few other resources there that we discussed earlier. So you can see there is a lot there to accompany the enterprise budgets. Okay, so I'm actually going to shift over to the Seed Enterprise budget here so we can kind of take a look at it on a tab-by-tab basis. I'm just going to go over here. Okay. So is everybody seeing that enterprise budget on the screen there, the spreadsheet? Yeah, okay, thank you. What I'm just going to do is start at the beginning here. Okay, so I'm going to go through, and I apologize for people who do not like spreadsheets. I will try to make this as painless as I possibly can. I'm a little bit of a spreadsheet geek, but I do like to try and explain things in a simple manner so it makes sense and isn't overwhelming. So just in terms of a quick overview of the spreadsheet itself is hosted on Google Drive. And so the way you access it is the link exists on the website. You can come to the spreadsheet and then you can copy it into your own Google Drive. And the reason we like to do stuff on Google Drive is that if you need help, I can actually access your spreadsheet through Google Drive and help walk you through things, as opposed to sharing a Microsoft Excel file back and forth. So this makes things much easier to share. You can see at the bottom, there's a bunch of different tabs. We're on the preparation checklist there, but then there's notes and bed details, farm overhead worksheet. So we're going to go through each of those and just take a quick look at them. But it's broken down into different sections, and that kind of helps make things a little less intimidating because you can really go through things step by step. And then you can see these little black boxes here. These are comment boxes. And so with each of the tabs, there's a number of comments within each of the tabs. And so they're little reminders and prompts to help guide you through the process. So watching the tutorial video is great. Doing the consult to go through things one-on-one is great. But then these are just little reminders of things and what they mean, and little guides to keep you going. So I'm just going to go through these quickly tab by tab to give you an overview of what you'd be looking at. So as a general rule, anytime you see a green square like this, that's a place where you can enter data. And then if you go here, you see these sort of yellower squares. This is where calculations exist. So you enter data into green squares. You do not enter data into the light orange squares. Those are the automatically calculated squares or cells. If you are comfortable with spreadsheets, you are welcome to edit this as much as you want. But in general, these things, a lot of the tabs are connected. So editing one thing is going to change something somewhere else. On a lot of the spreadsheets, I have this little info cell here. And if you just hover over it, it kind of just gives you a little overview of what the spreadsheet is for. So I'm just going to start back at the preparation checklist. This is kind of an optional tab where if I'm going to do a one-on-one consult with you, I might get you to come in here and fill out a little bit of this information just to get us started. And then as we start looking through the other tabs, we can take this information from here and start putting it into the actual spreadsheet where the calculations are taking place. This is sometimes just an easier way for people to put things into there to get started. So the notes and bed details. So as I mentioned, when we look at our overhead costs as well as our production costs, what we're trying to do is spread the costs, the overhead costs, evenly amongst the beds on the farm. And I call these the theoretical beds because it's kind of based on spreading that cost over how many bed feet you have, what the size of your beds are, and how much land you have. So in this case, there is a bit of information filled out here where if I have generally have 100-foot beds and my bed width is about 3.75 feet and I have 5 acres in production, well, I basically have this theoretical number of beds of 582. So when we look at farm overhead costs, what this spreadsheet does is spread those costs evenly over those beds. And one way to look at that is that farm overhead cost gets applied to that bed, whether you grow something in it or not. You pay rent, you pay for the website and all that stuff, no matter what. That doesn't change. And so you want to try to maximize the use of your space in order to get the most value from that. So that's what this does here. And it just helps spread those costs over the farm. For the farm overhead worksheet, there's 2 components that we look at primarily. One is your wages. And so what we want to do is look at different wage levels that might be available to farmers. What we've tried to do is set it at sort of 3 levels. So one would be sort of, more labor that's coming in and doing what the sort of lower level tasks that might be less skilled. Maybe you've got some students working on some of that stuff. Then we've got sort of a mid-wage here and then a management wage. So there are different wages you can put in here. And then what the spreadsheet here does is adds these other costs. So which would be taxes, workers' compensation, which is going to vary. And then a little thing we put in there called non-assigned time. And this is the time that we spend staring, texting, walking between crops. It's really hard to manage all that time very, very carefully. And so what we just assume is if something, we record something as taking an hour, generally it takes longer than that because of all these little activities that get coupled with it. As we go down to the second section in overhead costs, these are the costs of sort of running a farm or having a piece of land. Everything from your mortgage to your insurance, your website, your organic certification, advertising, your phone, these are all costs of doing business. And so when we're growing a crop, we can't just say, the seed cost me $7, the compost cost me $10, it was 2 hours of labor, that's how much money I put into that crop. We do need to include a portion of these costs here. The way we've done this is we've had a section down here where you can add other costs. So we've broken it down into sort of management, office work, and maintenance. And this is going to vary with different farms, but it just allows you to take into consideration that time fixing tractors, putting up greenhouses, doing administration stuff in the office, and general staff management, depending on what the scale of your farm is. And then it breaks things down below. So you can see There again is our number of beds, which auto-fills from that previous tab. And we've also just put in a percentage here that 99% of our farm is these beds, and I've got like 1% is in greenhouse. And so what you can see is the overhead here has been broken down into our beds and our greenhouse cost. And just on the little bit of information we've put in there, these are the costs there. So an overview, and this starts to make more sense once you start putting in your own information, and we won't get into too much detail there. But hopefully that makes a sense that we're taking all these overhead costs that are not necessarily going into the direct production of costs and including them in the overall cost for producing each of our crops. The next section here is for if we're using a greenhouse or an isolation structure to grow a crop. And the approach here is to take that structure, take into consideration the cost of the structure, the materials, the labor to put it up, and the annual maintenance on that structure, and then amortizing that over the expected life of the structure. So I have filled this detail in with the isolation tent that we've been using for carrot seed production at UBC Farm. So the initial cost for that is about $1,700, which has all the components there. And we break that down into, you know, if that structure is going to last 20 or 40 years, how do I amortize that over that period? So this one we've amortized to about $100 a year for that. The other consideration is what are the costs in maintaining that structure? And for us with this carrot seed tent, we had to take the tent and move it every year. We had to do repairs on it if there were rips in the mesh. That needs to be cleaned. We've had to pick it up and move it around. So it has added these costs. And so when you scroll down, you can see that the cost of just having this tent without even growing a seed crop in it cost us about $315 a year. So one of the things this enterprise budget does, it really starts bringing in the reality of what it actually costs to grow a crop. So those are sort of all the background things that go into crop production. And then we get to the section where we start breaking things down by crop. So this page here is a very big, very intimidating page that we've tried to simplify to keep all your crops on one page and not have too much open at a time. So this spreadsheet has been developed to give you values on 9 crops. So it's really designed more for contract growers, because if you were a seed company, you would be growing many more crops, and this would be a lot to take record of in this way. So this one is meant for contract growers, and this is up to 9 crops that you could be doing at a time. So there's a quick link to all the crops up above here in this section, and each crop is now sort of condensed, and I've closed that section. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the beans-orca section here and just go through how we input the information for each crop. So when I press on the expand button here on the side, what it does is open up a whole bunch of hidden cells, which is where I input the information. So this first section here is our basic crop information. We're just putting in details about what we're growing, where we got the seed from. And then we're going to put information in here about our harvest data, our seeding data, what our bed stuff actually autofills here, because we've already put that information in previously. What I just need to put in is how many bed feet I'm planting, and it'll do those calculations for us. In terms of seed yield, I'm going to use a projected seed yield based on the charts that we'll get to or my experience. And it is from this information that we're going to start getting the spreadsheet is going to start producing information that's going to help us determine what the value of this crop is. So the second section here is really where we start putting in the information about producing the crop itself. Thanks for the comments there, Daniela. I'm sorry if anybody's already overwhelmed. This is why we like to walk through it. So this one is set up to do both annuals and biennials. And so if you're doing a biennial, you need to think about your production in the first year to produce the steckling, and then the second year to produce your seed crop. And apologies if that fire truck driving by was really loud for you. It was for me. So when we look at producing a crop, we're looking at all components of that. So that's going to mean preparing the soil, seeding, weeding throughout the year, any trellising we need to put up, any crop care we need to do, going through looking for insects, anything like that. Some people have a gift of being able to record their time really well. Other people, you're just going to have to make an estimate based on how much time you think you spend with a crop. I'm of the opinion that estimates I think they're suitable. But if you are spending more time with some crops than others, it's important to know that. So what we get here in the first section is sort of, this would give us a sense of how much did it cost to produce the stecklings. And then in year 2, as I scroll down, we're going to put in this information, and it's going to give us the detail about how much it's going to produce the seed crop. And this is all blank for now, but if I do a one-on-one with these, we would take a look at a few sample crops so you get a sense of what that looks like. So once we have that information, the spreadsheet starts producing reports for us based on what our expected rate of selling would be and how much seed we've produced. So on the left here, it kind of puts this crop report that summarizes everything. And then on the right is these set of income estimators. And there's a price per kilogram here this one's based on very small scale crops being sold at a premium. And you can adjust these prices depending on what sort of contracts you've worked out. And what it helps you do is determine, at this contract level, how much seed do I need to grow in order to be profitable? So it breaks things down into a few different ways here. I won't go into too much detail there. But the next section here starts to look at sales projections. And the way things are set up here, just on the left here, is for you to be thinking about selling to 5 different markets. And really that could represent 5 different prices and many different volumes of sales. And so we can break things down by packet size and value, and then down below it starts to break that stuff down. So in the end, it'll show us a value that what is this crop worth in this season? And it'll also tell me if I sell everything I expect to sell, am I going to have any seed left over? And it allows you to determine whether you've produced the right amount of seed, too much seed, too little seed, or if you've got a seed crop that you can sell over many seasons. And some people like to do that so they can mix up the varieties, and other people want to move varieties through and sell it all in one season. That way they're not storing the seed, and the seed is being used fresh all the time. So a lot of the stuff gets summarized down below. And then you can see as I get to the end here, I get into my next variety here. And so I have all these varieties on one page. And if I want to go, I'm going to scroll up. I'm going to close this one so I don't get overwhelmed. And then I might go down to variety 5 and start looking at the information there. So we have all these variety things on one page, but we close them up here because looking at too many rows of data at one time is confusing and overwhelming and very stressful. So it's sort of an overview of the things that go into determining what the cost is for each crop. And what you'll find over time is that for similar crops, the pricing is going to be the same. The costs are going to be the same. All my brassicas will be very similar. My biennials will be very similar. It's when you get into things like structures, trellising, harder to clean seeds that you might see some variation. But I think once again, using estimates for some of those gives us a really good start in understanding those costs. I'm going to skip over quickly here to the seed crop, the yield guidelines. So we do have some information here based on existing data. And it helps break things down into estimates per row feet or 100 row feet. So we're trying to look at things in a fairly consistent, with fairly consistent metrics. So you can use a chart like this to determine, whether you're using row feet or bed feet or square feet. There's a few different ways to look at how to calculate what the value of a seed crop is. Over time, you'll replace these numbers with numbers of your own production that are going to be more accurate. And ideally, we want to be sort of gathering data from farms throughout BC and throughout Canada so we can see what the sort of range of yields is. I know from my experience growing a carrot seed crop this year, I grew 1 outdoors and 1 right beside it in an enclosure, and my outdoor crop had twice the yield of the enclosure crop. So there's a lot of variability that could be in there. So my recommendation is to estimate low on your yields, but still at a reasonable level so you're not underestimating too much. So the next tab here is our summary. And so this is actually just being revised because we've added some more crops. But once we've put in a bunch of crop data, what we can do is this summarizes it up. So I can see that if I'm growing, 3 or 4 different crops over a season, and these are my expected sales, this kind of breaks down about how those sales are going to look in terms of packet sizes and how it's going to look in terms of revenue. So this allows you to see in one place how that stuff all summarizes instead of being it all very fragmented. There's a few other tabs in here we'll look at quickly. If you're doing transplants, this tab here helps break down the cost of the flats and the soil and the labor it takes to prepare those trays, and it amortizes those trays over multiple uses. We've started one here if you're doing different spacing. This will help you determine what your spacing looks like, how much seed you did use or would use theoretically, and that just gives you a more accurate seed cost, which needs to be taken into consideration with your production costs. And then here we've started a list of, if you're trying to price your stuff in the beginning, what is the value of carrot seed or watermelon seed? And we started a few here looking at the prices at high mowing. So if you're doing some estimates in the beginning, you're using reasonable prices. So you're not underpricing or overpricing yourself. And in doing this with someone like with the contracts or with the BC Ecoseed Co-op, you would have a set price already. So you would know very specifically what the price would be for that crop. Another thing we're hoping to fill in here as well is just examples of different types of labor in terms of what your cost would be for weeding, for trellising, things like that. And so you can quickly, if you've never grown a crop before, at least use some tools like this to estimate how much time is going to go into it. So it's a very, very detailed spreadsheet. And I think, despite what I've just done, going over it in this way doesn't offer a lot of value to you. Where the real value comes is in using it and walking through it with somebody else. That process really just helps you understand your pricing more and what your input costs and everything looks like. So that's a general overview there. I'm going to try and just open up another one here. So I do have one here where we could take a look at one of the seed crops. I'm just going to hide something here. Okay. So I'll just pull up an example here of our carrots. So here we did Nash's Nance carrots. We had an estimated yield of 4,000 grams. And this is from 2 40-foot beds of 3.67 feet wide with our spacing details and everything in there. So details are in here for the time that went into all the different aspects of it. And you can see it starts calculating the stuff as you go. More information here. And so as we get down to this section here, down in the lower right-hand side where my cursor is, the cost to produce that crop for us ends up being about $710. And this includes our labor costs, as I mentioned, the structure, the cost of buying stecklings, all this stuff is included in there. So what I need to do as a farm is make $708 in sales in order to break even. Now, the way this spreadsheet is designed is if you're breaking even on a crop, that crop is basically profitable, because breaking even means you've been paid for your time, all your materials have been covered, and all your other labor costs have been covered, plus your overhead has been covered. Anything over $710 in sales is profit to the farm. And so that means all the costs have been covered. And so that's a really important thing to remember, because if you do $710 in sales while it's break even, you've still been paid for that work. And that's really important. So I'm going to scroll down here and show you how we used things here. We looked at a few different options for sizing, and this has actually been updated in a new version that I showed you just a minute ago. But we've broken things down here in terms of selling some to the Ecoseed Co-op, some to Salt Spring Seeds. I've got an estimate of the weight I'm going to sell at each of these sizes and the price there. And you can see that if these estimates are accurate, that I'm going to do $420 in sales and have 94% of my seed left over. And so what I'm seeing here is, okay, I don't have a very big market for the seed based on this calculation, but I'll have a lot of seed left. And if I can sell $420 over 2 years, I will make my money back. And you can see I will have enough seed to sell the seed for multiple years, assuming the quality of the seed maintains its quality and still germinates. So my goal here would be to sell more seed to both of these companies, or to add another contract in here. And maybe my goal is to make my money back in the first year. This is going to vary from crops and between growers. This one here as well, this has changed a bit, but you can see it summarizes things here for all the crops that are listed. And so we know our overall sales end up being about $7,600. So there's a lot of detail that goes into things. And the more you use the spreadsheet, the more intuitive it'll become, and the better you'll be able to use it for doing estimates. And over time, of course, you'll just know which crops make you money and which ones don't. But hopefully this spreadsheet helps give you an understanding of what it is that's allowing that to happen. So I am not going to subject you to any more looking at those spreadsheets. I'm going to just come back to my other screen here. Excuse me. Just a quick, just a summary of some of the things that are really, really important to consider with using an enterprise budget like this successfully. Number one is the more you track, the more accurate things you're going to get. So if you really know your inputs well, your costing will be very, very accurate. What we're seeing is selling to multiple sources is going to give you the most opportunity for profitability. And this is especially important if one of your markets happens to fall through, you might be able to sell more to one of the other markets. So this just gives you a bit of flexibility here. I do recommend estimating things a little on the low end in terms of yield, but over time, you should be using your own yield data to get a very accurate estimate of what you can expect. And really, I can't stress enough of having those overhead costs included in there. It can be a little bit of work to do that, but you don't need to do that for every crop. It only needs to be done once. And that number will only change a little bit every year as rental prices or website prices and stuff change a little bit. So even though it might be work in the beginning to get it done, in the end, you're front loading a lot of that work, and a lot of the calculations after there end up being quite a bit easier. So once again, I want to guide you towards our website at bcseeds.org. We have a ton of these resources there, including the contract resources we looked at earlier, a link to the tutorial on the enterprise budget, plus a link to the template where you can download that and take a look and start going through it on your own. If you do have an interest in growing seed on contract or just doing more production with seed and selling it, get in touch with me, Chris at farmfolkcityfolk.ca, and we can book a time to go through that seed enterprise budget together, input some of the crops you're looking at growing, and really start giving you a better sense of how that crop will look for you in terms of production. I do want to take this moment here also to thank our funders. We've had grants that have really allowed us to do programs like this over many years. The core funding we've had for the past 6 years has come through the W. Garfield Weston Foundation, and that comes through our work with the Bauta Family Initiative on Canadian seed security. And new funding this year has come from the Ministry of Agriculture through the new Canadian Agricultural Partnership. So these funding sources are one of the things that allow us to put the time into the energy to developing these the crops to help you along in your seed growing endeavors. So I'm going to leave it there for enterprise budgets. If you've fallen asleep, I apologize. I know that is tedious, but I'm hoping going over that really gives you a sense of what that tool looks like and how it might be valuable to you as somebody who might be going into seed production or is interested in seed production as a new revenue source for your farm. So while I take another sip of water and coffee, feel free to start throwing out some questions there. We've got some time to definitely go into more detail on seed enterprise budgets. And if you have any questions from the previous section on contract growing, you can still throw those out as well. I see you're all taking a minute to breathe and take in the 100 million cells of information I just showed you. So that's good. Good self-care. Oh, Yoshi, you found the putting your hand up icon. We had lost that. Good work. Yeah, what's your question, Yoshi?
My question is around the quality assurance, well, maybe quality, sustaining quality of seeds, and any cost associated with it. Say if we were to test using the seed lab agencies, or in case of the quality fails after we market, what would be the consequence of that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, Yoshi. So when you look at the cost of quality assurance and what tests you might have to do, that's going to vary from crop to crop. But if we take something, so a basic test that every grower should be doing, and to be honest, by law, growers need to do in order to be selling seed of any type in Canada, is a germination test. And the Canadian Food Inspection Agency has guidelines for the sort of acceptable levels of germination for different crops, and that varies between crops. Now, you can actually sell something with a lower germination rate, but you do need to put that germination rate on your package. Because some growers might say, well, this germination rate is lower than I'd like, but I'll just sow more seed because I really want this variety. So you're going to pay anywhere from $15 to $25 potentially for a germination test. So if you're growing 1 or 2 crops, that's not a big expense. But if you're doing 100 or 200 crops, that is a very major expense. And so a lot of the small scale packet growers will do their own germination testing, but they won't send it to a lab. Now, as you scale up, and basically your level of liability and responsibility increases, the need to do those sort of tests with an accredited lab will become more and more important, especially when selling to farmers. Now, so that is an example of a germination test. Other tests we might see would be in, say, a lettuce crop if there's a disease that's very prominent in seed, or as we're seeing with brassica seed in the Pacific Northwest with blackleg. There is, you probably can't sell a brassica seed in the Pacific Northwest of the U.S. without having it tested in a lab for pathogens. So as companies grow, their level of liability is going to grow. And I think as a seed grower, this is going to make more and more sense to do things collectively, because then those costs can better be shared amongst growers within, say, like the co-op. I'm happy to say there are some new resources coming online at Kwantlen Polytechnic University in Richmond. They received about $650,000 from the federal government to build a seed and plant lab at the Richmond campus, and they do have germination testing there and a bunch of seed sorting and cleaning equipment. And so they're just getting that lab up and online, but we're really hoping that that's a resource that we can use and the co-op can use to help do some of this testing and get that more streamlined. In the beginning, that's something we might be able to use free of charge, but over time, as the co-op grows and contract growing grows, we may see more and more costs becoming associated with that. Over time as well, as the co-op grows, there's a likelihood that they'll invest in some of their own equipment. And so it can bring some of that cost down in terms of sending stuff to a lab. But of course, you're going to need to put in somebody's labor to do that testing on behalf of the co-op. So there's always going to be costs there. Sometimes keeping those costs in-house really keeps them a little lower and gives the co-op a little more control over quality assurance. So yeah, there is a lot to consider there, and it is an additional cost. It definitely is. So does that answer your questions, Yoshi, or is there any more detail you'd like there?
Thank you. No, that's great. And have you ever had any difference, like a reported germination from the grower, then after you market through, say, Bcc the Co-op, and if there's any discrepancies, or was there any, how the growers and seed companies say, how do they deal with any of that if they face that kind of challenge?
Yeah, so that's another good question. So I think as a seed purchaser, you get a couple of experiences. One is you get a crop with low or very low germination rate. You get a crop that doesn't come true to type. I ordered lacinato kale, and here I've got red Russian kale or a different type of squash. Or you're finding there's a presence of disease that clearly came in on the seed. So I don't know about the co-op experience, but I know through doing the Bcc trials, we've ordered seed from companies that seed has come and had a very, very low germination rate or not germinated at all, or has cross-pollinated with something and it's clearly got a lot of off-types in there, we will follow up with the companies in those cases and say, hey, just so you know, this is crossed or this one isn't germinating. And often the companies will be very thankful. They'll pull that from their product line, or they'll do what they need to do on their end. So you're going to get various responses. If I was buying that bulk seed for my farm, I would hope the seed company also is going to replace that seed. There's a limited amount of liability around how much that company is liable for in terms of your lost wages because you couldn't produce a crop. And this goes back to that idea of quality assurance. And one of the reasons that growers, are actually often very reluctant to bring in new seed suppliers, because once you've established a relationship with a seed company that you have that you can trust, it's really hard to bring somebody new on. So there's a lot of pressure as a new seed company and a new seed grower to maintain good quality, because if you sell somebody bad quality seed, it's less likely they're going to come back the second time.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome. Right. Any other questions there? I know it can be a little overwhelming at times. So if people don't have, so what I'm going to do just here, I'm going to put a quick link in the chat box there. And what it is just a link to a post-webinar survey. It's just done through Google Forms. And if you get a chance to click on that and fill it out, it only takes a minute or two. Your feedback's really valuable for us and for our funders to give them a sense of how valuable this webinar was for you. I am hoping to hear from some of you in the future that might want to go through this seed enterprise budget and look at some crops you're growing now or are hoping to grow in the future. I have been in touch with a few of you, and we will set up a meeting soon. And same thing, if you have more questions in detail about contracts that maybe we could answer at another time as well. So we do have a few minutes here. I'm happy to answer some questions if stuff is arising for people.
Hi, Chris. It's Michael here again. So it's incredible because I was more sort of thinking like back of a napkin kind of enterprise budget. So if I'm doing filling out some of this information, is there any, and I think I kind of missed it because there's quite a bit of information. Was there any sort of like existing information I could sort of tap in and sort of build off that? With regards to, I understand what my rent or hydro or something, but could you just refresh me? Does that exist? Like, let's say if I want to do a spinach thing, was there some sort of basics, just sort of groundwork to start off with?
Yeah, so some of those, so that's one of the things we're trying to develop, is actually getting a sense of, is there an accurate sort of format we could put down for most crops? Like spinach basically takes this long, and carrots basically take this long. We don't quite have a template for those yet, but we do have some crops where we have some very specific information. So I'll be developing a specific one for a carrot seed that I grew this year and took very detailed notes in terms of labor and inputs and things like that. So that'll be a very accurate one. I have some accurate data from some of the crops at UBC Farm. And so we will have stuff that's, okay, it looks like it's about, an hour of soil and seeding, or soil prep and seeding, 2 to 3 hours of weeding and trellising and processing. So we will develop that over time. Right now we have just a few of those and then a few estimates. What we're really hoping to draw on is growers' experience, just knowing my background's in microgreens, and I can tell you very specifically after 10 years what it takes to grow a crop of sunflower or 100 trays of sunflower. So over time, what we do hope to have is a template. So you actually don't have to fill this out. We just say, hey, if you're growing spinach and you're going to do 100 row feet or 1,000 row feet, here's likely what your costs are. And every farm is going to be a little different, but it's going to at least give you a range. Like, is it going to be $70 in cost, or is it going to be $700 in costs? So that range will become more and more narrow and more accurate the more people we spend time with the enterprise budgets.
Great, thank you.
So hopefully a few of you have clicked on the link there and done the post-workshop survey. It really, really is valuable to us. I insist, if we were doing an in-person field day, I would give you chocolate in return for filling that out. But now really the best thing I can do is an emoji. And I didn't even get an emoji there. Oh my. So yeah, if there's no more questions, we have been here for an hour and a half. I don't know about where you all are, but it's gone from a very gray, rainy day to now being sunny. And so it seems like a good time to get out and enjoy the outdoors. So if there's no more questions, yeah, I just want to say thank you to everybody for coming. That was a great list of questions. And if you have any more questions, feel free to email me, Chris at farmfolkcityfolk.ca. Please don't forget to take a look at our website, bcseeds.org. And yeah, I do hope to be engaging with many of you in the future to take a look at some of these enterprise budgets one-on-one.